All right, welcome class. This is for Civics, our first real content lecture I'm going to be delivering, and it's on the subject of poverty. What can or should be done? In this unit, we have a few essential questions that we care about, and they are, what should be the role of the government in mitigating or limiting poverty? What is the government currently doing to alleviate poverty, and is it sufficient? What, if anything, should the government be doing differently to mitigate poverty in the United States? And that last question is what you guys will be using as a guide to make your project in this unit. Okay, so some things that we will be doing. We will analyze and evaluate documentaries and readings that illustrate the effects of poverty in the U.S. I want you guys to participate productively in group and class discussions, conduct research on the issues of poverty in the U.S., create a poster, maybe a slideshow, maybe a video, which outlines and conveys a position or recommended solutions to the problem of poverty. And we'll talk more about this in class on Friday. I also want you guys to present your poster/project and solutions to your classmates. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of what is poverty, I thought it would be helpful to see what are Americans currently earning, okay? You'll see a lot of numbers. You'll often see average income. Average income in America is around $60,000 a year. However, that is distorted by the amount of the super rich we have living inside this country. Instead, I prefer to use median income, which means what someone in the 50th percentile is earning. Currently, median income is around $34,000 inside of our country, and 70,000 individuals make less than $50,000 a year. And this shows our median income over time, the shaded areas being recessions, okay? And if we kept going this map, we are obviously in a great recession right now as well. If we break it down into some different groups, we start to see some inequality in the median incomes. This is for people, and we are looking at the difference between men and women, okay? So here we see these are full-time workers with all workers averaging 39,000, men averaging 43,000, and women only averaging 33,000. One thing you might be interested in looking into is in the wealth gap based on gender inside of our country and discovering some reasons why that wealth gap exists. Unfortunately, in our country, we also have tremendous inequality at times between people of different races or ethnic groups. Our census breaks down into 4 very basic categories that I think we should probably expand. Asian, which includes everyone who is Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Filipino from Thailand, as well as everyone from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Saudi Arabia, Iraq. Those are all considered Asian in our country. And currently, that is the highest group, the group with the highest median income with a little over $40,000 for full-time workers. The next group, white, which again could encompass all sorts of different people, is down at about $40,000 for full-time workers. Next, black, which again can encompass many different kinds of people, immigrants from the Caribbean, immigrants from Africa, people who are born to descendants of enslaved people inside the United States. They average a little over $30K a year. And then Hispanic, which is people who have any kind of Latin-speaking heritage, it's down at about $26,000, $27,000 a year. There's also, of course, a great deal of inequality based on educational attainment. Your teachers are always telling you guys the importance of education, and there is some economic information to back them up, okay? So people who go to high school, just some high school, average around 24,000. High school graduates, it goes up to 33K. People who have some college or an associate's degree, it's right around $38,000. Most programs at Parkland offer an associate's degree. If you have earned just a bachelor's degree, it's right around $56,600. Master's degree goes up to $70,000. Professional degree, which could be like a law school diploma, it goes up to $91,000. And then if you are a doctorate, the average person makes 80 grand a year. Maybe you're thinking this is low. This also includes, besides medical people, people who have PhDs in history and stuff like that who might have a little bit harder time finding a high-paying job. In class on Wednesday, we looked at these federal poverty guidelines. This is what the federal government considers to be poor. So if you are an individual living by yourself and your gross annual income is more than $12,140 a year, congratulations, you're out of poverty. If you have an additional person in your household, like think of a single parent with a kid, if you make more than $16,000, congratulations, you're out of poverty. Okay? On the right side here, it shows our approximate hourly wages as well you need to earn to escape poverty based on the size of your family. If you are a single person working with 7 kids, you're going to have to make quite a bit more money to escape poverty. I shared these in class yesterday, but they're ways of looking at what your income is as a net after taxes, and then comparing the cost of living of our community to other communities around the country and around the world. As we saw, it's actually relatively cheap to live in Urbana, Illinois. Now, in Illinois, many of you guys might be making the minimum wage of $8.25 an hour. Okay, if you're working full time, you may get up to as much as $14.30 a month and an annual salary of $17,160. As we saw before, that puts you outside of the poverty level. If you are earning that kind of income, you're actually going to take home around $1,100 a month, and you get to keep about 83% of your income. The rest is going to taxes and FICA and other things like that. When it comes to who qualifies for federal benefits, the government will sometimes use a multiplier. So it's about 130% of the poverty level to see if you qualify for Section 8 housing or to qualify for SNAP, aka Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, aka food stamps, aka that EBT card, okay, which we'll talk more about in class later on. I went to the Illinois website for Supplemental Nutrition Assistant Program, and I put in some imaginary numbers. If I was working full-time as a minimum wage worker and I had 1 child living with me, the federal government would give me $275 a month in EBT spending or in food stamps, which is money I can spend on groceries and not on anything else legally. So they would give you a little bit. Would this be enough to provide groceries for both people in the household? Probably not. Okay, I'm going to share a couple more things with you guys before we finish today. A little more background about poverty in general. In America, poverty disproportionately affects children. Okay, about 1 in 5 children currently live in poverty. And if you compare us to other industrialized, wealthy countries around the world, think of the countries of Western Europe, Japan, South Korea, Australia, our rates are higher for poverty. Even though when this statistic was taken in 2011, children were only about 24% of the population, they accounted for 35% of those living in poverty. Our country is made up of 50 different states, as well as several different territories, and poverty is different in each state. So this map here is showing you a little bit about where poverty is concentrated, with those dark blue colors being the most impoverished areas, and so on from there. Illinois is actually in, looks like this second category here, okay? And the numbers change slightly year to year, but we usually have a high degree of poverty in our state. You might be able to make some historical reasoning why poverty is in the different places it is, especially here in the Deep South, over here in New Mexico, which unfortunately contains a lot of impoverished Native American people who have been forced onto reservations in these areas. And as a group, Native Americans generally have the lowest income percentage. Also, Puerto Rico, which is part of the United States, and the people that are born there are citizens, is also has high levels of poverty. This gives a little bit more detailed information, but I really like this chart on the right here where you can look at the poverties of the different states. Mississippi on this one is the highest with 21% of the population, followed by Louisiana, West Virginia, New Mexico, more of the Deep South. And then at the very opposite end, New Hampshire, which is this little state in New England, has the lowest level of poverty of only 6.4%. Our neighbors, Minnesota to the north, also pretty low, but a lot of the lower ones are in the north, especially in the New England area. From 2011, these were the top 10 states, and all of them are in the South. I believe, yes. Inside the United States today, about 60 to 63% of the population are white or Caucasian Americans. Because of this, the overall number of people who are living in poverty are more likely to be white than other people. They do make up the majority of impoverished Americans. However, that only accounts for about 10% of the population. So numerically, white people make up the majority of those in poverty. As a percentage of the white population, it's lower than some of our other groups. For African Americans or black people, the number, unfortunately, as a percentage is higher, with about 1 in 4 of them living in poverty. For Hispanics or Latino or Latinx, it's again about 1 in 4 are living in poverty currently inside of our country. If we focus in a little bit more locally and look at our state, we can see that there is some differences in the poverty level between our different counties. We are here in Champaign County, next to Vermilion County over here, and both of these counties have high levels of poverty, while those around us, Clinton, Piatt, DeWitt, these places do not have as high of poverty levels. Cook County is where Chicago is up here, and you can see the high amount of poverty with less in the suburbs. Over time, our state has gone through different ranges of poverty, and unfortunately right now, this level is going up as we deal with the COVID recession. Looking even more locally, just at our county in comparison to the state of Illinois, we're going to look at some numbers that, although they don't tell us whether or not there's poverty, they are deeply related to poverty, and there's always some correlations. We have slightly fewer people who graduate high school, although Urbana is doing a much better job of that these last couple of years. Another thing to look at is how many teen births are happening, and our number in our county is about double that of the state of Illinois. Also looking at unemployment rates. This is really wrong now. We know that COVID has come in and drastically wrecked the economy, so the unemployment rate, I think, is more like 20% currently. Okay? If we look at that poverty rate, though, that is higher in our community than it is throughout the entire state. If you look at a few more numbers, our child poverty rate is actually slightly better than the Illinois rate. Our total number of people living in poverty in our community is 36,000. In the state, it's about 1.6 million. In Champaign County, the household income, which means if there's 2 workers in the family, you add their incomes together, is around 51,000. Less than the state, but that's understandable considering the higher wages in Chicago and the suburbs. The living wage calculator, which tells you how much you have to live decently, okay, you would need about $58,000 in Champaign County if you had a young child. If you can compare this to the number we have up here, we see the average family is falling about $10,000 short. A couple more statistics here. Rent burden households, that means they're paying more than a third of their income in rent. In our county, that's about 30%. And about 40% of people living in our county are renting, not owning their homes. Of those people that are renting, the mean hourly wage is only a little bit above minimum wage, $10.30. If you wanted to rent a 2-bedroom apartment in Champaign County, Its fair price would be about $830. However, most renters can't afford that, so they fall short. Okay, so when we look at this 1030, they would need to make about this much an hour in order to live comfortably. Another myth you guys might have is that people who receive governmental assistance are not working. In fact, that is not the case most of the time. In our community, people that receive supplemental nutritional assistance, 87% of them have at least one worker in their household. Okay. Some other numbers is the uninsured rate. If you've ever had someone in your family not have health insurance, you know how dangerous this can be. Also, low birth rate, okay, which tends to be unfortunately correlated with poverty. Child food insecurity rate, or kids who had a hard time getting enough food as they needed, was relatively high, 18.5% in our county. We'll talk more about these things during our class time and add some more information about what the government does with regards to poverty. For Mr. Harris's class, these were your two assignments for the week: the poverty reading questions that went with those modules, and then watching that Poor Kids documentary and answering the questions about that.